Live. I'm fresh off the bike. I went to the lab today, and can we talk about Ironman Louisville bike course for a second here? Strategically, I went out there today. I'm okay. So I think for a long time I've had this concept of easing into each sport. Like as the swim starts, you just kind of wind up and you get stronger towards the middle and the end. Of course, that's a negative split sort of mentality. I've always felt like, I'm a slow warm up person. And, as you talk about the Louisville bike course, it isn't really conducive to that mentality necessarily because you come out on River Road and it's flat and everybody's amped up. And the thing I think most people, including me, have done in the past have gone out too fast. You got 10 miles roughly until you hit that first hill on River Road, and you have the energy of the peloton basically carrying you, and you're going, probably faster, much faster than you're going to average for the whole day. So I like to think about that. And today I had that in my mind when I went out to the lab. All right, so I'm going around in a big oval. One way I got a little bit of wind, the other way I'm going into the wind. And it's not a stiff wind, but the goal, the thought pattern I had today was, all right, I'm going to go out there. I rode from my house. It's about 3 miles to the lab. And you go on a greenway, so I go slow. And when I got there, probably after the first 5 miles of riding today, I was at about 14 and a half miles an hour. And, just kind of just going. And then I just settled into this idea of zone 2. And I'm thinking about Louisville and how I'm going to come out. And my target today was 2 hours. So I just kind of like embrace this zone 2 ride, right? So I'm just going out with when I think of zone 2, because I don't use heart rate or power, I use breath. And for me, zone 2 is not breathing hard, and it's comfortable breathing. And also on the bike, it's not feeling your quads flare or hamstrings for that matter. But usually it's not feeling for me, you can feel that like pincher in your quad when you're kind of going into what I would consider zone 3 or above. So I'm just kind of going in zone 2, but then all of a sudden I got this thing in my mind about like, okay, you know what, zone 2 can fluctuate. For me, it can, because as I'm starting, I'm going slower, and I wouldn't have called it like zone 1 or anything, but I would say I was going slower. But as the ride increased, I basically just maybe went up a gear and kept what I considered the same effort. It was a zone 2 effort, maybe zone 2.2, but it definitely wasn't going into the 3 area, and maybe a little bit bigger gear occasionally, depending on the wind. But yeah, so the interesting thing was by the end of 2 hours, I was in the ballpark of what I would consider my goal Ironman pace. I was a little bit below it, but I was, I started out certainly slower. There's no way I could take River Road at 14 miles an hour. So, I feel like it was in the ballpark. And I just found that interesting because, it's a 6-hour ride roughly for most people, 6, give or take. And it has been for me. I've been like 6 hours almost every time. I've had a couple below. And I would much rather be able to hit that last 10 miles on River Road and go faster than I went out on it. I mean, with, perceived effort being relatively the same. So it just really makes you think about how to ride a Ironman bike course, right? It's 100, there's a thing I like to do whenever I go on a ride is when I hit mile 12, I like to just remind myself that I have 100 miles left, and that can be a daunting feeling. But if you race Ironman, you sort of get in this like mindset where you're just going to be out racing it. And the next thing you know, you're at mile 70 and you are screwed. So it's a long day. And the very thought that I just kind of zone 2'd it up into, gradually increase my pace on it. It was basically a normal flat surface, consistent surface. So it was a consistent effort, but it really made me think, because a lot of people will ride an Ironman with a 2-loop course like Louisville. A lot of people will ride, kind of under control through the first loop, and then really ride the second loop kind of with some effort. And in order to do that, you have to have energy to do that legitimate effort. And then as you get back to like maybe the stick for the last 20, 30, 25 miles or whatever the heck it is, you just kind of back it down into that zone 2 again, but hopefully not worn out. And so I'm just thinking about that as far as my strategy goes. Like, okay, so I don't know, by the time you hit the second loop at Louisville, it's probably around mile 60. That could be wrong, but you get the point. 60 area. And if you ride that hard for 30 miles, then you got like 30 miles left to kind of settle back into this zone 2 feeling and to get your legs and not, wear them down towards the end just to save a certain pace. You're going to have to, it's like a mental game, because after that second loop, if you ride it, with some effort and go after it a little bit, you're going to, gradually probably be sliding down miles per hour in the last 30 miles, but you have to be okay with that as long as you know that you're going to settle at your target. I mean, it's all like, I'm really into this kind of thing with body power, calibration and things like that. So, but so I'm just trying to mentally get in there to be patient for that first 60 miles, and that is a very difficult thing to do, especially coming at Louisville when you got a flat surface coming out of the gate for the first 10 miles and you just got out of the water and everybody's jacked up and firing along, and then, you just don't want to let anybody pass you. But after 10 miles, you still got 100 to go. And, most of those people are going to fade away, and they're especially going to fade away on the run. So again, that's the ultimate point, right? Is that if you can ride at a comfortable pace for most of that course and put a little effort into that second loop and then sort of recalibrate and get back into a steady, comfortable pace for the last 20 miles or so, maybe that's the key to running well. Instead of trying to save your average, like I've done this in the past. I've that last 15 or so miles, instead of being where I want to be, I'm trying to either save or hit a certain average. So I am actually probably going way out of my zone the last 20, 25 miles in order to just hold a sub 6 or sub 6 has been the goal. At Chattanooga, it was to hold 20 miles an hour, which I did one year. And, while it hasn't destroyed my run typically, I don't think it set me up for a good run. And I don't know. It's all about this feeling, that feeling in your legs, like that zone 2 feeling where you're putting in a steady effort, but it's not that quad burning. And if you're not trying to hammer it and you got a nice wind or a downhill, there's no sense in being an arrow at mile 20 to really, unless you're resting and not pedaling on a coast or something like that. But it's interesting to try and navigate. Obviously, if you're racing for the podium and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole different animal. But what kind of a goal you have from that bike race or that bike course is to really be strong at the end, as strong as you can be, or at least not weak. And that's the same with the swim. And obviously, I mean, the run is a whole nother animal that I'm still navigating. But I know that after yesterday I swam. I skipped this video yesterday, but I did go back in the pool and I swam sort of a similar thing. I was really focused on zone 2, and my zone 2 is a pretty good pace. I would be happy with that in Louisville, right? So in the swim for sure, and I have to be able to find that. And now it reminded me that I think I just need to swim longer zone 2. Because what happens usually at the end of a swim is I just get tired and then it all goes to hell. And I can literally remember just trying to hold on at the end of several Ironman races. I'm good through about 3,000, and without being able to um, bring it home, and that's sort of, I think that has a lot to do with the same thing. It's like you just don't understand. The best swim I've ever had was at Louisville, no wetsuit in the summer. And I was scared to death because I hadn't done a long swim without a wetsuit, and it was my best swim. And I think it was because I just really did not rush it at all. It was all about comfortable, slow, steady strokes, zone 2, and nothing out of it. I never went out of it. And I got out of the water, and that was the freshest I think I've ever felt after a swim. And it was my fastest. So you can, put that kind of stuff together. And I really think that that sort of thing will hold true with the bike and the run. And I just think this idea of, for me, my zone 2 actually shifting throughout the workout. If I go out and especially like if you're running, a lot of people will say they're out of gas when they start the run and they start breathing too hard. Of course, they're going too fast, or usually it's a swim because they haven't warmed up. And if if you're going at certain cadence or certain speed and you're out of gas early in the race like that, that's probably just because you're not warmed up, more so than it is maybe that pace toward the end or middle of a race would feel like no big deal to me. So that's where I think this is sort of fluctuating zone 2 thing is kind of interesting. And there's probably a scientific term for it, and I just don't know, but I always go by feel and try to sort things out. And hopefully the way that, thinking about it in different ways can help somebody else figure it out, rather than, people can't understand zone 2 sometimes. And that's why I get a lot of shit for it. But that 10:17 run for me is the zone 2 forcer. If I'm going any faster than 10-minute pace on a run, I have to walk, and that keeps me in zone 2. So, take that for what it is. Had a good ride. I'm taking my bike over because it needs to really get revamped, new shifters and new cables and all that, because it's just awful. It wouldn't hold any gears in that race the other day. But so I'm going to take it over because we're going to Ohio the next day, and they'll have a few days to get at it. And we are going to Ohio, and I'm going to be up there. And if you're not racing and want to go running or swimming any of the times, I'm going to keep working out. I look forward to seeing everybody. Stop by crushingiron.com and see what's going on there. And also, as always, Monday and Thursday, the Crushing Iron podcast. I am Mike. I'm the co-host with Coach Robbie, and we've brought you 183 podcasts. So thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.